Houston, we have a problem. Where are the astronauts? NASA officials found it more difficult than they expected to surprise the astronauts of the Artemis II mission with the news that they were going to the moon. Houston, telling 3 NASA astronauts that they had been chosen to go to the moon was like trying to hold 3 surprise birthday parties. Surprise parties where the recipients of the surprise inadvertently thwarted the plans of the organizers. It is a funny story, said Victor Glover, the pilot of the moon mission, because in one way or another, all of us were late or missed it in some fashion. On Monday, NASA announced the crew for its upcoming Artemis II mission that is to swing around the moon late next year. Of course, Joseph Acaba, the chief of the NASA astronaut office, had decided weeks before which 3 NASA astronauts he wanted to send on this trip: Mr. Glover, Christina Koch and Reed Wiseman. The 4th member of the crew is Jeremy Hansen of the Canadian Space Agency, and he was told separately. Mr. Acaba did not simply call or email them with the news. This would be the first time in more than 50 years that humans would head toward the moon. You wanted to find a way to get all those individuals in the same room without them knowing what it is to make it special for them, Mr. Acaba said. He first checked when they would all be around that day at Johnson Space Center, the headquarters of NASA astronauts. Then, because the 3 might have become suspicious if they knew they were all being summoned to the same place at the same time, he concocted separate fake meetings for each of them. Mr. Glover was coming back from a lunch meeting. I was like, "Hey boss, I'm going to be a few minutes late," he said. I sent him a text message. At the same time, Ms. Koch was at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, the huge swimming pool facility where NASA astronauts simulate spacewalks underwater. It is several miles from the Johnson Space Center, and she thought she could attend her meeting remotely. I opened up my computer to sign on to the virtual meeting and realized there was no link, she said. And so I texted our boss and said, "Hey, can we just meet virtually?" And he said, "Nope. Continue reading the main story." She quickly drove back to Johnson. I was late, she said. Very late. Mr. Wiseman was at the doctor's office. Like all good doctor's appointments, this one was going way over, he said. He told Mr. Acaba he was going to miss the meeting, but Mr. Acaba said he should join via video conference. When he did, Mr. Wiseman saw not only Mr. Acaba but also Mr. Glover, Ms. Koch and Norman Knight, NASA's Director of Flight Operations, who is Mr. Acaba's boss. I was like, oh man, this is not the meeting I'm supposed to be missing, Mr. Wiseman said. We feared that we didn't show well at that moment, Ms. Koch said. And then they found out the news. After all the embarrassment, Mr. Glover said, they asked us how we felt about being the crew of Artemis II. Mr. Wiseman, who was selected as commander of the mission, said, it wasn't the greatest start. They were a little bit late, Mr. Acaba said. And luckily, I didn't want to change my mind. Mr. Hansen found out more simply, via a phone call from Lisa Campbell, the president of the Canadian Space Agency. That was a pretty special phone call for me, Mr. Hansen said. And then I was permitted to share it with my wife and children as long as they were sworn to secrecy. How 3 NASA missions could send astronauts back to the moon. Since the final Apollo mission in 1972, the moon has been undisturbed by human footsteps, but that may soon change. NASA plans to send astronauts back to the moon this decade in a series of space flights called the Artemis program. The first mission, which concluded Sunday, was a test flight with no crew members aboard. Eventually, though no earlier than 2025, NASA plans to send astronauts for a week-long stay near the moon's south pole. The crew will include the first woman and the first person of color to walk on the moon, NASA said. 1. Departure. The Orion spacecraft and the Space Launch System rocket launched from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. 2. Moon orbit. Orion orbited the moon about 43,000 miles above the moon's surface. 3. Return. In preparation for splashdown, the crew module separated from the service module. The crew capsule splashed down in the Pacific Ocean with the help of parachutes. Instead of crew members, the first Artemis mission carried 3 mannequins named Helga, Zohar and Commander Mooniken Campos. Helga and Zohar contain plastic models of radiation-sensitive organs, such as the uterus and the lungs, so that scientists can study how radiation in space may affect future astronauts. The 3 mannequins traveled inside a spacecraft called Orion, specially designed to protect human crew members and experiments in space. Orion launched into space atop the Space Launch System, a new rocket that stands 322 feet tall and weighs almost 6 million pounds. The Space Launch System used in Artemis I is one of the most powerful rockets ever developed by NASA and can send a payload of almost 60,000 pounds to the moon. The Space Launch System compared with other rockets. Artemis I. After launch, the astronauts will orbit the Earth for 24 hours while testing the spacecraft's controls and life support equipment. Lunar flyby. The flight to the moon before the flyby will take 4 days. A recovery boat will collect the astronauts and the crew capsule after they splash down in the Pacific Ocean. Artemis I, the second mission, will carry 4 astronauts around the moon and back to Earth. The cruise trip will take them about 4,600 miles above the far side of the moon. Depending on the position of the moon during the mission, this could be the furthest distance into the solar system that astronauts have ever traveled. Artemis I. After launch, the astronauts will enter Earth's orbit, perform a systems check and make solar panel adjustments. While 2 crew members land on the surface of the moon, Orion and the 2 remaining astronauts will stay in orbit. Moon landing. The lunar lander will undock from Orion and then descend into a lower orbit before landing near the moon's south pole. 4. Moon launch. After a week-long mission on the surface, the astronauts will ascend into a low lunar orbit before docking to Orion. 5. In addition to returning the crew to Earth, the Orion crew may also bring back scientific samples for future testing. In Artemis I, astronauts will land a SpaceX Starship near the moon's south pole while Orion waits in lunar orbit. The polar region is home to mysterious, permanently shadowed craters that have not seen sunlight in billions of years. The chemicals frozen inside could help scientists understand more about the history of the moon and the solar system. If the Artemis I mission succeeds, NASA plans to regularly send crews to the moon. Its plans include a lunar base camp and an outpost spacecraft called Gateway stationed in lunar orbit. What is a black hole? Here's our guide for Earthlings. Welcome, Earthlings, to the place of no return. A region in space where the gravitational pull is so strong, not even light can escape it. This is a black hole. It's okay to feel lost here. Even Albert Einstein, whose theory of general relativity made it possible to conceive of such a place, thought the concept was too bizarre to exist. But Einstein was wrong, and here you are. You shouldn't be here. Surely you will be pulled in. But fear not, dear Earthling. Your brain has taken millions of years to get here, and it's ready for this gaze into the darkness. So let's get started. A black hole is a hungry beast. It swallows up everything too close, too slow or too small to fight its gravitational force. With every planet, gas, star or bit of mass consumed, the black hole grows. The edge of a black hole, its event horizon, is the point of no return. At the event horizon, light is drawn into a black hole, never to escape. And nothing is faster than light. If you fell into a black hole, it's not clear how you would die. Will gravity rip you apart and crush you into the black hole's core? Or will a firewall of energy sizzle you into oblivion? Could some essence of you ever emerge from a black hole? The question of how you would die inside a black hole is one of the biggest debates in physics, called the firewall paradox. It was posited in March 2012 by a group of theorists including Donald Marolf, Ahmed Al-Mary, James Sully and Joseph Polchinski. Based on the mathematics in Einstein's general theory of relativity of 1915, you would fall through the event horizon unscathed, then the force of gravity would pull you into a noodle and ultimately cram you into singularity, the black hole's infinitely dense core. But Dr. Polchinski and his team pitted Einstein against quantum theory, which posited that an event horizon is a blazing firewall of energy that would torch your body to smithereens. However, the presence of a firewall would violate the precious principles of relativity, which decreed the existence of black holes, and so physics is stuck. Pretty much everything we know about how the universe works depends on black holes. Either someone is wrong, or we have to admit that Earthlings still aren't equipped to understand the universe. The firewall paradox calls into question the most definitive theories of science. The insights and wisdom of Einstein, Polchinski or Stephen Hawking notwithstanding, everything we know about the universe could change if we could know for certain what happens to information inside a black hole. Black holes can sing. In 2003, an international team led by the X-ray astronomer Andrew Fabian discovered the longest, oldest, lowest note we've heard in the universe, a black hole's song, using NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory.